So as a women's leadership organization, we are passionate about changing the conversation for women business owners. In order to do that, there are some things that we need to normalize, things that we need to bring into society today, into business today, to make meaningful connections. So the first thing that I'm going to tell you that we need to normalize as women leaders is we need to charge more. And I want to be clear, this is not charging more for the sake of charging more, right? There are definitely people in the world that are like, we just keep raising our prices to see if people will pay them. That's not what we're talking about here. We are talking about charging more because as women, we statistically undercharge. If you go out into the world and you look at the service that you offer and you look at other companies and other businesses that offer that same service, they are likely charging more. The reason that I know is I've literally coached hundreds and hundreds of women. And when they bring their pricing to me, the number one thing that I tell them is to raise their rates. And like I said, not for just the sake of, hey, we want to make more money, but for the sake of, this is what other people are charging for these services. These services are extremely valuable. The way that you support people, the results that you get people, the work that you do is extremely important and should be charged for accordingly. I very often share the statistic that women start businesses at twice the rate of men, but businesses run by men actually wind up making more money, wind up being around for a little bit longer, and that typically has to do with cash flow, right? The number one thing that we need in a business to run is cash flow, and the number one way to do that is to charge more for your services. So go out into the world, do your research, talk to people, look at other companies doing similar services to yours, and start charging accordingly. It will make all the difference in the world in the growth of your business, in your financial situation, and how serious clients take you. We forget that sometimes, that our pricing is part of our brand. So if you are grossly underpriced, if you're not charging accordingly, people are going to wonder, why is this so cheap? What's wrong? Why is that other person's proposal double what this person's proposal is? So can we please normalize charging more? The second thing that we need to normalize as women leaders is stay-at-home dads. I happen to be married to a stay-at-home dad, and it's been such a game changer for us. But so the statistics tell us that in 1960, only 3% of women out-earned their partners. Now in 2023, that number is over 50% of women are either out-earning their partners or earning about the same amount of money. But what has not leveled out is the idea of the stay-at-home dad, of the man in the family being the one who stays home and being the primary parent for their kids. And this maybe isn't a conversation for you and I as women leaders. Maybe this is a conversation we need to have with the men in our lives, but really normalizing that if you are going to be the one out in the world earning money, however that looks for you and your family, is that, if somebody is going to stay home with the kids, it does not have to be you. And I know this is societal conditioning for both us and for our spouses, but it's really, really an important conversation because for me, I've always been the breadwinner in my relationship. When I met my husband, I was out earning him. And it made sense. At one point in time, his business or his job was taking him away from the home. It was taking him away from the kids for a fraction of the amount of money that I was making. And it made no sense for us to continue to invest in childcare and continue to have him away from the home and me picking up all this extra slack around the house, despite my business being the one who was actually funding our lifestyle and paying our mortgage. And so I just want to normalize the conversation. So if you are a woman who happens to out-earn or desires to out-earn your partner, start the conversation now. What would it look like for you to be the primary parent? Is that something that you desire to do? And, in our house, it's not just primary parent. We lovingly joke in our house that Kevin is the project manager and that I am the project. He is in charge of our house. He makes our house run. He does all of our meal planning. He does all of our meal prep. He does most of our cooking. He does most of the laundry and all of those things. That doesn't have to be the case in your house. The number one thing he asked me when we talked about him staying home 3 years ago was, can we keep the cleaning people? And the answer was yes. So his one thing was he didn't want to clean the house, but the rest of it he was happy to do. He's better at it than I am. He's more patient than I am. He likes people more than I do. He likes to be out in the world talking to our kids' to our kids' teachers and interacting in that way. But the conversation has to change. If we want to out-earn our partners, if we want to be the breadwinners, if we want to grow giant companies and demand a lot of money for the work that we do, we have to normalize having the support that we need. And sometimes that happens to be the other adult living in your home. The third thing that we need to normalize as women leaders are more women leaders. What? So I'm going to tell you a story about this one. So my former business partner, there were a lot of things that didn't go well in that partnership, but there were a lot of things that I learned from her. And when she went to hire an executive team for her company, she had a really hard time finding women to sit in C-suite level roles. She had a lot of time finding women who had the experience necessary to run her company, or what she thought was necessary. And whether she was right or wrong is not the point of the conversation. But the point of the conversation is that we need to normalize women leaders. We need to normalize women in places of powers inside of companies. And we need to do this amongst ourselves. So as women, we have to be willing to make space for women leaders. Another reason I think that this is a challenge for us is not just people with experience, but also our fear of emotion, right? We are fearful, or we are accused of women as being overly emotional. So why do we want to put somebody who is overly emotional in a place of leadership, right? But what I would argue is that our overly emotionalness, is that a word? Us being overly emotional is actually what makes us so powerful. It makes us great leaders. It makes us really good at connecting to people, being empathetic, serving others, having that serving heart. I mean, women are fantastic at relationships, which makes us fantastic leaders. But when we look out into the world and we're looking for examples of leadership, there aren't a lot of women to look for. So I think it is our job as women leaders to have this conversation, normalize this conversation, equip ourselves and equip the women around us with the tools that we need to successfully lead companies. So again, whether this is inside your own organization or you work for somebody else, we need to put more women into leadership roles, and we need to have a conversation about how do we do that? Because a lot of the reason, in my experience, that women are opting out of leadership has actually more to do with their support at home than it does for the company they work for, right? It's not as much that the company doesn't want to put more women in leadership roles. It's if I step into this leadership role, I can't be as available to my kids, or I can't be as available to my spouse, or I can't be available in these other places that I want to be available. And the only way that we change that is by having conversations about support, about how that works, flexibility in the workplace, how we learn to lead with our innate gifts and not just step into the footprints of the guy in front of us. The fourth thing that we need to normalize as women leaders is connection over control in leadership. This ties perfectly to having more women leaders, right? As women, we are known for being more empathetic, being more sympathetic, being better at connection. And that is actually what leadership is. The problem is we have no examples of it. Right? If we look around the world, we look at who's running successful companies, they're typically run by men, right? We look at who led us in our corporate careers, it was typically dudes, at least for me and the experience that I had. But what we are so excellent as is navigating leadership in that way. So I really want us to think about how do we use the skills that we have, the gifts that we have, our empathy, our connection, our emotional intelligence, the ability to share our emotions, our ability to be more open-minded to new ways of doing things to really empower ourselves as leaders. And this is more probably geared towards my business owner friends, because we want to be CEOs, we want to step into places of power in our companies, but we don't have any examples to look at, right? We can't look around and find another woman in the places that we are. And sadly, a lot of the women who are in these places of power or running these large companies or running these wildly successful businesses, all that they're doing is repeating what they saw. And frankly, I don't want to do that. I know that you don't want to do that either. So what we have to normalize inside our organizations is a more transformational style of leadership, a more connection-focused style of leadership that is about serving our team versus just this authoritative command and control style of leadership that has been gone on for decades and decades of time before us. It's our job and it's our opportunity to really take this and change it. How do we focus on connection over control? And then the fifth thing that we need to normalize as women leaders is trusting ourselves. It's trusting ourselves. So often at Be in the Room, we talk about self-trust. How do we learn to trust ourselves? And frankly, this is the hardest one because we were never taught to trust ourselves. In fact, it was the exact opposite. We were taught to trust other people. We were taught that we should just follow this blueprint for success, do what we're told, get the degree, follow the footsteps of the guy in front of us, do it that way, and that's how we'll be successful. And what has happened is we now have an entire generation of women who are like, who am I? What am I doing with my life? And do I even want to be here? Do I even want to do this job? Do I even want to work in this industry? Do I even want to pursue this? And it all comes from not trusting ourselves. It all comes from not really being honest with ourselves about what we want. And when we normalize trusting ourselves, checking in with our gut, doing things because we want to do them, not because society says that we should, not because it's the next logical step, not because it's the right thing to do, but because in your body, in your entire body, from your mind to your heart to your emotions, you feel connected to something, that is the most powerful tool that we have as humans. This is not specific to women, but when we learn to trust ourselves, trust our ideas, trust our gut, when something doesn't feel good, we say no. And when something does feel good, we say yes, even if those things don't make sense. And I know that this is not logical. I know that we are not taught this, but this is why we have the power to change this. Because when we learn to trust ourselves, when we do the things that feel good, that's where success happens. That's where our businesses explode. That's where our careers explode. That's when we're able to do things like charge more and have meaningful conversations with our partners about being stay-at-home dads and look for more women leaders and focus on connection over control, because we know that we are fully equipped as leaders, as women, as human, to actually do the things that feel good and to trust ourselves to do them, even when logic, the blueprint, society, and the person in front of us did it differently. If you are a woman leader who resonates with this message, who wants to normalize things that are not normal in our lives right now, and you want to have different conversations about leadership, about running a company as a woman, like, follow, subscribe. We want you to be part of our community, and we want to continue to serve you in a big way.